Hey there, editing Vanessa here, just to tell you that this episode is so inspiring, especially if you're looking to pivot in life or like if you're getting to a place where you don't know who you really are. This is the episode. But did you know that I forgot to hit record at the beginning of this episode? Yeah. So you can watch those first few seconds on when I realized that I didn't record at the end of this episode where I pop in that little blooper. Hi, and welcome to the Hidden Pages podcast. On this episode, we are peeling back the layers of what our expectations and all the societal pressures that we have and finding out who we really are and that purpose behind all those layers. And for this episode, we actually have a guest that I'm very excited to have, which is Mary Ruiz, who we knew each other from work, but she was helping her mom run a multi-million-dollar company and decided to pivot in life to a new career for her own self, for her mental health, for her well-being. And now we get her professional insight as a counselor, but also as someone who's done this pivotal change in her 30s with a child and married, which if you know anything about having a child, that's really hard. And so in this episode, we're going to dig into both your life experience on that and your professional insight with people that you see. And we're going to start with the layers that we carry of expectations. Mm-hmm. And I guess what were those layers that you felt on yourself and what you saw that you had to peel back to find that true sense of yourself?
The first thing I think of is just being a helper, being the oldest daughter of a single mom. There was 4 of us. My brother was about 6 years older than me, and my 2 younger sisters were all 18 months apart. And, single mom from the time I was really born, but he was gone fully by the time I was 5. I picked up very quickly that an extra set of hands was really necessary. And was mommy's little helper, nicknamed Mother Mary, all of that.
Oh,
So
God.
being a helper, but growing older, also the church communities that we were in, the religious upbringing that I had was also informative of my identity, big time with being a girl, being a woman and needing to play those roles as well. Like, I guess I'm a helper at home, but that also matches really well with the idea of what a good Christian woman is being taught, brought up to do in the future as well. So I had that in my mind, that was like the greatest end all be all is just wife and mom, which is a great thing. But it's a little different when it's like that's the only purpose, or that's the greatest purpose, right? And to do this, you need to act a certain way, look a certain way, have these values, have these beliefs. And then getting older, it was a lot of like I guess purity culture ideology got to me a lot. I could crush on anyone, like I love people so much, and was a little bit boy crazy internally, but never could express any of that because there was so much shame around any kind of talk about boys or sexuality outside of the goal of marriage and like the godly version of that. And so, yeah, being a helper, being of service, that was the crown, that was the identity from a very, very young age, and still kind of creeps up as what I feel.
Yeah. And it's very relatable in the sense of like I'm also the oldest child.
Girl, if you're the oldest girl, you're pretty much the oldest child.
Well, from my parents, because at this point we're 11 from my dad's
Congratulations.
side. A side note, we just found another one through 23andMe. So it's just like one of those. But in my home, the 3 children that were raised together in the same home, I have an older sister, but she lived on and off with us. But yeah, I was the oldest child, and same thing. I was very fiery too, so it's like they were trying to beat it out of me how to obey.
That was a big
tie
one.
down to your husband, so you gotta obey. Keep that head down.
That was
Keep
a big
that
one too.
mouth shut.
I was very much that way as well, and yeah, that is a big one for me. I like would journaling and in prayer and just like crying out to God, please make me more meek and mild. Sad.
That brings me back to the whole like they think that they're shaping you to be a certain person, but all they're doing is making you hate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All those comments, the you should, that's not right,
Mhm.
doesn't make you hate them or what they see in you. It makes you hate yourself and not being that image that your parent wants.
Yeah, we internalize those expectations and then they don't even have to uphold them anymore. We're policing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy how what you've, because I had to like divide those voices, but anything you heard in your childhood kind of becomes your internal like negative voice that
Mhm.
is constantly telling you, but now it's in your own tone. So you think it's yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Being a helper, being of service, being a good girl,
Mm,
whether that was sexually or how I presented myself or the questions I asked or didn't ask, or yeah,
yeah.
yep, sit down, be good, be quiet.
That one was really, really hard for
I
me.
don't think any of us really accomplished that. So good
Especially
for
if
us.
you're neurodivergent. It was like you were bad for both reasons
You
because
d-
that's who
mhm.
you were. And then, like, I mean, your brain worked differently. And back then, especially culturally for Hispanics, you just needed to beat it out of them.
Yeah. Well, and that was the key in our household too, and
Yeah.
because of the religious upbringing. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody thanked their kids, and that was like just godly.
Yeah.
God, if you didn't, you're not in line with you know godly parenting. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yes. Oh, I heard that one a lot.
Y'all just traumatized us.
Yeah. Cause now it's just that bad kid mentality, right? Like, I was just a bad kid. Like, I had to really, even as an adult, rewire that a lot.
Yep. Yeah. Same.
I'm a good person.
Mhm.
I'm a good person. Like, that was hard from like, why are you so bad? And trying to break that spirit, right?
There was a lot of spirit breaking. You're right. A lot of
Yeah. I guess this one I didn't ask earlier, but what's the hardest layers of expectation you had to let go of and why?
the hardest level of
Layer.
expectation layer. Yeah, that family, that your blood family is the most important relationship of your life.
Mm,
Beautiful when that actually works. Very, very harmful belief when you're in a dysfunctional or even abusive or highly controlling environment with your family system. And that is probably one of the newer things for me to not feel so conflicted about
mm,
cognitively. When I go back and forth, I don't really argue with myself that much anymore about why it's okay for me to detach from relationships no matter what the tie is if they're not good for me. Um, but it certainly is different than detaching from other types of relationships as well. And knowing that I have permission to do that, that not only is it allowed, but it's necessary
mm.
for new things to happen.
I love that it's necessary because sometimes, that whole thing that sometimes you just need to hear you have permission to do things, even though it's there.
Yep.
Um,
It's
then
also
sometimes we think, well, this is not kind or this is selfish or whatever it is, but sometimes it's necessary
it really
to
is.
like,
And we don't have to live on the top of a mountain alone to heal, but you
mm,
certainly can't do effective, more efficient healing work swimming in the same soup we're trying to heal from. You can't do it.
yep. And I think the biggest, because that's a layer I've had to, I mean, I'm in the middle of it still, but like I've had to peel back because we have those layers of like family and everything, but like culturally, it's like you're told when your parents are older, you have to take care of your parents all the way to the end. So like there's this like marriage to your parents all the way to the very death,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, that's been a lot of clashing for me. And like, yes, it's definitely one of the hardest ones for me too.
Yeah.
But I've learned that sometimes your friends are your family that you get to choose. So sometimes they come in and fill on those spaces that feel
Absolutely.
very empty.
They do. And We have it tattooed on my body, family over everything. Me and Sarah got that a while ago. And I think about it at least weekly, but sometimes more often than that. Like, oh, girl, me now would have never put that. And it doesn't mean that I don't love my family or have relationships with
Hmm.
anybody who I would talk about here, especially my mom. I do, but it's different and it has to be. And if it wasn't, then I would be getting worse, or I would just pretend again like nothing was wrong. And
Mm.
you can't do that. Once you see, you can't unsee. Once you know, it's really hard to shove all of that back.
It's that Pandora's box you open and
Yeah.
there's no putting
Yeah.
all that thing back in.
There's
Yes.
not. I mean, there was a lot of grief and, like, I'm 35 now. The detaching process for me, having lived at home all through college until, like, the month before I graduated, I was 21, then working in my family company up until I was 30, and then at 30, I feel like my personal life began. And so 5 years out from that, it's getting easier, but that really was the hardest thing, was that you don't have to sacrifice or be a martyr just because you share the
Blood.
same blood. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can go your own way, like the song.
Yeah. The next one was, what is a sign that a person is disconnected from themselves?
Yeah, well, I'm a provisionally licensed counselor right now. I'm very close to being fully licensed, but anything I say from a professional opinion, I just want your listeners to know that I'm provisionally licensed at this point. Um, the connection that you have to yourself, for me, when I'm observing or meeting with a new client, or those first few sessions that we have, or even just like friends and family that I know very well, can tell like whether or not they're saying anything to the effect, like when they're really dysregulated in their body. And I think
Mm-hmm.
being disconnected from yourself, the first thing you want to kind of hone in on, or try to connect with. It's not so much understanding every layer of what's going on cognitively or intellectually, but what happens in my body when I'm thinking about this person, or when I'm interacting here, or when I read something like this. Is my heart beating super fast?
Mm.
Tensing up somewhere in my body? Do I feel the need to run? Do I want to just like, now I'm just angry and I just need to fight? What's going on with the responses internally, and connecting your mind with your body, not just trying to figure it all out up here, but slowing it down a bit to understand what the basic needs are for your nervous system. Like, we can't really get good work done when we're in our emotional brain back here. I don't know all the
Mm-hmm.
words. Like this, the frontal lobe, when this is on, right? This is calmer. It's not like they're just off on, off on. But when we don't have regulation, it's really hard to do any kind of good work, mentally. So I think when you're trying to get back to yourself, and I feel lost or stuck or just totally unmoored to anything, I'm just like a, kite in the wind. I need the first thing that I would suggest is trying to find safety within your physical body, finding ways to calm your nervous system, and being mindful about when, if I'm alone, I'm pretty okay. Maybe I'm restless here or there, but then, ooh, that person just texts me, or
Mm.
request, or like, what's going on. Listen to that first, and the more we listen to like those bodily sensations, the more you're going to get to know, beyond your intellectual self, what your true self is actually okay with and not. So
And
connecting
it
to your
and
body.
it's crazy, right? Because the more you listen, because this is something I've actually experienced lately, was the more you listen, the louder that like internal voice gets of like, this is what I need, or I don't want to be social today, or I need some space, or my social media is done, or whatever it is. It's crazy how much it starts very little, right? And it builds up, as in like, oh, okay, now I know exactly, I don't want to be around these people, or I do want to be around these people. I do want to eat this, or I don't want to eat that.
Mhm.
It's like building a muscle kind of thing,
Yeah,
especially that.
it very much is. And it's not like the more you're connecting to your body and feeling safer physically, and not having as much, sensations or triggers. That's the easy way to say it. th- we have the intellectual part, the psychoeducation, the why, the understanding, the past reflection and processing that verbally. That's all still very, very necessary and important. I think we just have a much better chance of that being an effective part of our healing
Mm,
journey if we're at the same time and maybe initially, depending on how dysregulated you are, focusing on the basics.
mm,
Do I have enough sleep? Do I have enough nutrition? Am I drinking enough water? Do I get sunshine? Do I move enough? Do I talk to other people enough? Do I have joy in my
mm.
do I yeah, learning what we need physically can help us kind of set a good foundation for knowing all those other little things about ourselves.
You know what's crazy? Like, I love that you said that you could start that because, like, you don't need therapy to start that part.
Mm-mm.
But it took me going to therapy to know that I needed to start that part.
Yes, yeah. If you That's a really, really good point, and I needed the same thing. I had to get a lot of permission and then start giving people permission
Yes, the
before
permission part was big for me too.
yeah,
Like,
because
focus on yourself, listen to your body. The outdoor thing, like, I knew that exercise helped, but it's like I had to, it's going to help your mental health. Okay, there's a purpose for that. So now I will go do it.
if you feel really stuck and like I've tried for years or months and I don't understand these concepts that there's so much online and it can be really helpful and you can learn a lot, but if you feel like you're highly critical and
Mm,
with yourself or you just feel stuck with helping yourself or allowing yourself, therapy was absolutely the thing that did that for me,
yeah.
getting
And
permission to take care of myself.
yeah, that one's hard because it's like it can be common sense to a lot of other people, but it's like sometimes some people who are stuck in that like survival mode,
Mhm.
that's not something that doesn't cross your mind as much as taking care of yourself because you're just trying to like make it.
You're trying to make it, and, like, we were both parentified children, and you put yourself last, and so it's just
Mm,
a rule, and then you're not an expert on helping yourself, you're an expert on helping these other people, and when you go to do it for yourself, you're like, "Well, I don't even know how to do this," because, yes, I wasn't necessarily allowed or didn't have the permission, but even when I do, for all intents and purposes, like, now I don't know what to do
yeah,
because
yeah.
I wasn't allowed. I mean, people pleasing, we can tell people all the time, like, "No, don't be so hard on yourself," or whatever, but the highly codependent, people-pleasing type personalities are often usually perfectionists, and perfectionists are really hard on themselves, and then people that are really hard on themselves don't really give themselves the things that they actually need, so it's a vicious little chain reaction there, and it can absolutely develop if you had any sort of dysfunction in relational trauma or were a parentified child or a high achiever as a young person or have perfectionist tendencies or anxiety in social situations as well. A lot of those things
There's
keep us
so many
in check.
things that just merge together, and you're like, what is it? Is it all of the above? Sometimes I feel like a hypochondriac. I'm like, oh wow, that's me. Oh wow, that's me.
Yeah, well, it's not all of it, but a lot of these things are connected. Sorry.
Yeah. And they add, like you said, they become like a chain reaction that just add on to each other and become a cycle. And then you keep going in this wheel.
Well, we just learn how everything that's modeled to us is how we learn to do it. And that's why we have to step kind of back into the behavior and in the body and not so much here because when we're at our most malleable is when we got all the bad information,
Mm,
right? So coming at this point in our life and trying to rewire those things, it is really a challenge. It does take time. You need outside support, but once that pattern has more of, it's a little brighter, maybe a little louder than the other pathway. The more you do it, the more it's built on itself. I don't worry as much anymore about, I guess, feeling guilty. I don't feel
yeah.
as guilty anymore taking care of myself as I used to. And that's on mindless self compassion. I use that a lot in therapy with clients, and I do it with myself.
Yeah, that's a good one because the guilt, sometimes just the guilt
Mhm.
can like be depression inducing
Yeah. Yeah,
because you're like beating yourself up for
being a
being
human being,
selfish.
for needing to go
Yeah.
pee.
Yeah. Okay, so my favorite part that we're going to touch on is the pivoting of your life. So you went from helping run a multi-million dollar business to taking care of yourself and pivoting career and everything with a family and a child.
Mhm.
And not to say that if you're single and you do that, it's not hard, but like there's just a different layer of doing all of that while raising another human and having to like regulate yourself even though you don't know how to regulate yourself yet so that they don't have to.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess where did that begin?
It began well, I was just like, yeah, regulating yourself before you regulate. I didn't learn that until I was probably like 3 or 4, which is when the pivoting begins.
Well, it makes me feel better because I'm like, did I fuck up my child? Like, blah, blah, blah. Because I just
No.
started.
No, not yet.
Yet. I mean, I'm
You're
sure there's
fine.
some things.
You're fine. I know you, you're fine, and they'll be okay. We care, we are hold ourselves accountable, we build on our base, we learn better, we do better, we apologize, we confront. That is worlds different from what we were.
Yes,
You're gonna be
correct.
fine. You're a
Correct.
human. But yeah, the first couple of years of Ivy's life, I was a wreck, and she definitely, she has some anxiety issues, and I know it, nature versus nurture. If I would have been a perfect little calm princess during pregnancy in the first few years of her life, would this be different? Maybe, but I don't know that because also some of these things are just genetic too. But I was a
Mm.
mess while I was pregnant with her. I was a mess the first couple of years, and it didn't get better until like I was 30. So the first 4 years of her life, she had a dysregulated mom for most of the time. And that's okay because we know better and we're doing better. But when I pivoted was when my physical body, we were talking about that just a minute ago. I
Yeah.
wasn't listening to any of the signs or worries or even external people being a lot of people come in and out of that business and would be like, but it would give me concern, but not pause. The thing that stopped me in my tracks was being so miserable mentally that it started to affect my physical health. And I was really depressed, and my appetite was then really, really suppressed. And I woke up every work day vomiting violently or just nauseous for hours and hours, could not eat a lot, lost 50 pounds. Everybody's like, "You look so great." And I was at the worst possible mental health days of my entire life at that point. Um, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I was in therapy and it took me about 2 years to get to the point where I could accept the reality that it wasn't my fault. I couldn't fix it.
Mm.
I wasn't going to change it. There was nothing that I could say or do better to make all the things that were wrong be not wrong. And accepting that you would think would come with like confetti and a celebration and freedom, but it came with a reality check because knowing that cognitively and even deeper than that, I feel like knowing that it was okay. I had the permission to step away from the family business made a lot of things worse for me physically health-wise because then I had to take action and I didn't know how the hell to do that. I didn't know
Mm.
what am I gonna do and how do I was probably spent about 8 to 9 months being really sick, and then 6 it was about 3 months into that I was like, "Okay," and then I was checking out all the other physical things because something else must be wrong with me, right? It can't just be a toxic work environment and just
It
functional
can't just be
families.
stress that is killing me.
It can't be that, it has to be so I had, like, X-rays and an endoscopy, and the GI doctor that I saw, I don't remember his name, but I'll never forget this person. He really did change my life, and he looked me in the face after we had all my results saying, "There's a little redness, but it's probably because you've been barfing a lot for the past year almost, but everything looks fine. You're very healthy, but if you don't change your life, you're going to die." And I was like, "Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your honest feedback."
There you go. I got a green light.
It's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did. A month later, after that, I knew I was going to quit. And a month after I knew I was going to quit, I expressed that to my mom boss. And it was the hardest thing. Still, it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. And I needed something else to kind of latch on to, which was counseling. I went back to school to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And so once I had that in my mind, it's like I could grab onto that and let go of this, but I still had to walk through the part where I have to say out loud, I'm leaving, I'm changing, I'm not doing this. And it it was very, very hard, but it was also incredibly sad. Like I was so sad, even but I stopped barfing. I got better. I wasn't nauseous
Yeah, it's
again.
crazy because it's crazy how parallel, because like I watched this from the outside, but how parallel our lives went a little bit after, because I worked for my dad right before I got pregnant for like a year or two, and then same thing pretty much 2 years into Leia's life. I mean, my therapist was like, you're same thing that the doctor told you, was like, you're going to change something or you're going to burn yourself into the ground. And that conversation, I know what you mean, because I have exactly where I had that conversation and everything in my mind, because it was the saddest thing. And I think the sadness came from letting him down, my
Yeah.
dad.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was harder. I could suffer, no problem, but the
Yes.
thought of letting you down was impossible.
Yes. It was
Impossible.
the hardest thing, was to let them down, because you've been so programmed to take care of somebody else, or like,
Mhm.
and honestly, I think it also has to do with the whole making them proud or being the good kid.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, making them proud. Yeah, I don't know if I'm doing that anymore, but it's okay.
I know, but
Making
I think
myself proud.
that goes back to like being able to let go of that, like the ties, the family ties kind of thing, because I think I still struggle with that one sometimes, culturally and emotionally. But like when I learned that, like it was almost like I'm never going to make them proud the way they want. And I just had to let go of that. I think letting go of the family tie helped me let go of that.
Yes, the conditions of love, and I mean, it's
Yes.
not like we don't have to work in relationships or have expectations or
Yeah.
boundaries, but that type of conditional love is I'm looking for, like, a word that means suffocating. There you go. It's
Yeah. And now that I've like heard a lot of things, there's a lot of studies that have shown that the child who actually the boundaries in the long term, right, has a better relationship with the dysfunctional parent than those children who didn't, because it
Mhm,
ruins their life long term.
mhm.
As much as they feel like they have a closer relationship here, long term it ruins their life. But the child with boundaries, it didn't, so they don't resent their parent.
Resentment, that's yeah, resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good thing for relationships, and when that's what they're built off around, and all that we do or any of the reciprocity is just out of resentment or obligation,
Obligation. Yeah.
not real, not real.
The biggest thing I think that like I'm striving for, like the goal right now for me, the my short, or like I'm pretty sure this is long term goal, but like is to do things out of love and want
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
than must or have to or anything, because if I want to authentically live myself, I have to do it out of that,
Mhm. Yeah.
or I'm not doing
Good. Approved. You have permission to
it.
continue
Thanks.
because
I need that.
not only well, I tell people a lot with boundaries, not and you making that point of the children who maintain their personal boundaries and do that pretty well end up having a better relationship, even if it's not as much contact, but it's a better relationship. I tell people a lot that boundaries are not just for yourself. They are for
Mm.
relationships, and it's not. There's a lot to say about that world. I talk a lot about that in counseling, but it is the most compassionate thing that you can do, because when you're doing things out of obligation, not want and love, you're really a lot of things are energy, everything, and you're not putting that out. So when you do the things that you really truly connect with and want and love to do, that's what you're putting out. It's coming back to you. It's better for everyone. It is a real special thing. It's not mean. It's not bitchy or hostile or, something that we just
Mhm.
made up. It is for functional, healthy relationships that are based in mutual respect, reciprocity, the desire to listen, to understand, even if we don't at first, but mutual respect, reciprocity. I'm not doing this because otherwise there's going to be some kind of punishment or
Mm.
consequence. I'm doing this because I want to. And the more we all function like that, the better. The
You know what's
better.
crazy? Coming from a religious point stand, right? Because like now I have my own relationship with God, and I know a lot of people say that, but it's like I get it. I mean, I don't want to be part of a church right now. I don't want, like that's just like what it is. But
Yeah.
like I keep hearing, do all things from love or something like that. I don't even know all the verses, but
Yeah.
it is like they teach you all the ones that is good for them, but
Hmm.
like that you should be doing things out of love, and if it's not out of love, then you shouldn't be doing them.
Hmm.
Like, why don't
Greatest
we
of these
teach
is
that
love.
one?
Well,
Yeah.
because it doesn't high control, right? The reason that
Mm-hmm.
you, myself, and millions of other people, at least in this country and around the world, have backed away from that is the control, the high control
Mm.
space, high control religion. It is,
It has to fit in this little box, or it ain't it.
yeah. And it's to keep status quo, to keep
To look a certain way.
to look a certain way, to keep a family system looking a certain way, which is kind of broken right now anyway with
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, we're
Okay, and
busy.
then in that journey where you pivoted, what was one of the biggest lessons learned so far in pivoting?
Oh, biggest lessons learned in pivoting, that even when you make the right choice, it doesn't mean you're going to feel good about it.
Because so many people are guided by their feelings.
Yes. And that, like we were saying earlier, when you teach, you really learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a hard concept. And even I don't have it all the time, but it's not that your feelings aren't like, you'll see feelings aren't facts, right? They're not. And at the same time, our feelings can teach us about ourselves and about what we want or what we need or what we prefer or what we don't think or whatever. But they also need some kind of expression. So even though we don't have, I like to say we don't have to believe, or we don't have to, not all of our feelings are true. But it doesn't, if we say you don't have to believe your feelings or there are not flat facts, I feel like that can be something that actually stifles us from
Mm.
emotional expression. Like it's not important, or I just need to ignore that. And there are some mental health concerns where we do need to take some of these things that we have cognitively and have a real strict regimen around what we do with them.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like identity and family systems and boundaries and our purpose and those things that are just about our self concept, and how we treat ourselves and how we think about ourselves, it's really important to, yes, not believe or think as true all of our feelings, but they still, even if we don't understand them, even if they don't make sense outside of ourselves, need some way to express that, even if we don't do anything else with it after that.
Yeah. What did I just say?
We are two ADHD feminists. It's really this give me anybody a good idea of how I am as a therapist, because it doesn't happen all the time, but it is Friday if I'm tired the end of the week. And if I'm tired, this is what you get. Um,
You this
you said
was
after
yes.
pivoting, what did you do with, and you were talking about emotion. So you didn't write it down. That was just a question that you
No,
had.
yeah, it's just I was lessons from journey, like from your journey. That's what I just put a little bullet in. Like after
Lessons.
pivoting, what
Okay,
was the
yeah,
biggest
yeah.
lesson of your
I just went on
journey?
a tangent. That's why you're confused. It's my fault because I was like, wait, first of all, I had lots of emotions, but let me have this little PSA about that. Anyway, the journey after pivoting was one of mourning, right? And
Yes.
you would have gotten the tears earlier. I think I've touched it again. I knew it was coming. But after
Mm.
realizing I'm going to quit, putting in my notice, applying for grad school, making myself a nervous wreck for the GRE and doing all of that. Once I'm in school, it's January. The pandemics happened like 3 months after that. But
That's
like,
so true. I forgot about that.
yeah, I started my master's program January 2020 and then March, the panorama. The time from quitting to saying that I was leaving to being done um, with work and then starting that next chapter kind of felt like a blur. But once things were like, okay, it's quiet. I did the thing. All right, you're responsible for yourself and your child, and you got to do these little assignments. And otherwise, you're your wife and you're a mom and you're a college student right now. And that's it. I didn't work another job because had enough going on, and very grateful for a partner that supported me through
Mm.
that. That was not easy for him either. He didn't want to be there either. He has dreams, he has hopes, but he really
Yeah.
supported me deeply. But for the first 2 years, I would say pretty much all throughout my master's program, I was a very sad girl. I cried
Mm.
more than I've ever cried in my life, and I'm a crier. It's right there all the time. I'm sensitive, but I cried all the time, and I was mourning the relationship that I thought I had with my mom.
Mm.
It's not going to be, what either one of us wanted. And it took a long time for me to feel like that was okay. And some of it was mine, but a lot of it being so enmeshed, being
That enmeshment.
a parentified child and so codependent, a lot of my mourning was, looking back on it, was me being sad for her, like
Mm.
how she was feeling.
Yeah,
How,
because we're so programmed to like make sure they're okay.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I just,
because
I,
my like that emotional investment is more with my mom, but that like make him proud, don't let him down, it's with my dad. The
mhm.
enmeshment though, like I was so used to picking up, my mom dealt with a lot of bad depression, and so I was used to picking up her mood and making sure she was okay and stuff like that. And so that can get really hard emotionally because you're feeling both your feelings and what they are feeling,
What they could possibly be feeling,
possibly
and
be
you could
feeling.
be
Yeah, because
very,
you're assuming and you
oh,
weigh yourself down with both these emotions.
I had cut. So there was a long period of time too, where even with my siblings and friends or people that still work there, like I had to tell people, like, boundary, I can't hear about any of that. I don't want to know this frustrating thing.
Mm.
Even with my husband at one point, who like needed me to vent to about work stuff. I mean, that's like number one thing with partners. That's who you go to with your work shit. And that was difficult, but he listened, he understood. But I'm like, I can't hear about these things about at work. I can't hear about the stress or how hard it is or how someone misses me. Please don't tell me I'm feeling enough. But it was about 2 years of cry fest, just deep mourning, deep, deep mourning. Um, And then graduating, I was feeling very accomplished, very proud of myself. Like, wow, how did that happen? That went by so fast.
Did I
And
really take that jump?
did I really do this? And then things have really picked up from there. But motherhood sent me on this journey of self discovery. I'll just put that out there as number one. It was not until I got pregnant and then, yeah, it started then, but then, having her and becoming a mom
I
totally
love that.
changed me, totally changed
I
me.
love that because that's what it was for me.
Mhm.
Like I would have never left the space I was in
Never.
or stopped the life I was living if it wasn't for the fact that I had a child.
Me too. I just couldn't imagine having another one or just her. I mean, I'm one and done. But at that point, I was thinking that maybe I would have more. And I was like, I don't know how anybody does this.
See, I love this because that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, how does anyone have any more kids? Like, I just, I'm still in the phase where like I want to work through all this thing and see if my answer is the same after all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes carrying all that much, you're just like, the mourning, like you said, the mourning. I've mourned the relationship I wish I would have had. I mourn the person that I could have been if I would have had the support I needed.
Yeah.
I mourn like knowing who I am from the beginning instead of trying to figure it out in my 30s who the fuck I am or like what do I want? What do I want to do? Like I mourn seeing or giving my child the things that I wish I would have had. I mourn my child parts,
Yeah.
mourn
Yeah.
seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's yeah, you're right. Like I'm on the butt end of the morning right now because I don't feel it as deeply anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not because it's not there, because if I tap onto certain things immediately, waterworks.
Mm-hmm.
But like
You
but
understand.
like yeah, I've gotten to the point where I accepted it is what it is. And I can hold both truth. They did their best because they're in survival mode too, but I also deserved better.
Mm-hmm. I love that when any of us can, it's helpful and it takes time for myself or anybody else, a client or a friend or whatever. Nobody needs to rush themselves into that space.
Oh, in
It,
3 years.
it took me a long time too. I would say from the time I was thinking about those things until now, it was probably 12 years.
Mm.
I had to untangle those things, but I have a ton of compassion for my parents, especially my mom. And so that you did the both and thing. I love
Yeah.
it. And I don't have to deny myself just to keep that, whatever worldview or perspective intact for her or them. Both of my parents, y'all are adults. I'm an adult.
Mm.
See how you got here, love you, appreciate, and grateful for a lot of things too. There's so much silver linings of my childhood for
Yes.
sure. But what we're talking about is the covert side of what we
Mm.
learned that's modeled to us through the expectations our family systems have or our religious upbringing have or our cultural background demands of us. We all have permission to kind of take a look at it and question it. That's the first thing. When you can't question things, which is a big thing in families when you're younger, respect, respect, respect. But respect, it's supposed to be mutual. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be this hierarchy of, I'm the top and you're right here and I can do whatever I want, but you can't.
Well, I've loved to see that because I don't have models of that around me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't get that as a child. So Leia, my daughter, gets to go to a Montessori school. Some of those curriculum things are respect and letting the child be its own person. So all of these things, and I've gotten to see that because I didn't have that example. I felt like that's what I want. I wanted someone who teaches that, to teach that to her while I'm working on myself,
Mm-hmm.
on figuring out how to be that at home and regulating myself. And it was just like same thing you said, like when I decided to quit, because I quit everything, I just cut everything off,
For
a full-on
you.
store going. And it's crazy because all I wanted in my life was to prove to my parents I was that successful business person that they all saw in me, make them proud or whatever. I had a business going. I mean, I couldn't fulfill the orders every day. That's how good it was going. And all of a sudden, I took the jump, closed everything.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was really hard. But in that moment, I'm like mourning and everything. And so we decided we were going to do school for her right before that. And we decided Montessori school because I knew what kind of child I was. She is almost a mirror of what I remember being. And it's so beautiful to see what she's flourishing in just by getting that respect, because part of the curriculum for Montessori schools, like good Montessori schools, because there's Montessori-ish schools, but that's another thing, that they're respectful. The teachers bend down and talk to them face to face. That was really wonderful to see in developmental years when we didn't get it.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot. Like, I remember little highlights, but my sisters can remember a whole bunch. Me, it's like, yeah, y'all told me those things that I don't remember a lot from when I was very, very young. I would say not until I was maybe 10, 11 do I can be like, oh, yeah, I can picture myself there in my mind. I cannot do that for a lot of my younger memories. I don't even know what the
Which
hell
is
they're.
crazy. You say that, and I can't look back either. Look back.
Yeah. I mean, well, both things are common to not have the memory of a lot of things or to have very detailed, like you could
Mm.
describe everything, right? And we can't store every little thing either.
I know. It
And
almost
not all
feels like the
things
traumatic
are.
events.
Well, it's hit or miss for me. That's what I mean. Like some of the trauma things, I'm like, I don't really remember that at all. You just tell me about those things.
What role does the trauma play in like distorting the image of who we are and everything? Because like you pivot and then you have to refine that person that
Hmm.
trauma has distorted and
Hmm.
hidden behind all of those layers.
Um, I think, well, the parentified child piece and being of service and being a helper was one thing, but also I cared so deeply about my faith at the time, and to back away from that, I've been doing that since I was like 18 or 19. Honestly, it's not a new thing for me whatsoever, but backing away from that was the hardest thing for my identity. And I think the deepest trauma that
Mm.
I have is the religious trauma. The I mean, it affects your current life, the afterlife, the choices that we make in the present moment, how we think about ourselves as good or bad or worthy or not. What is probably the hardest for me, but trauma absolutely changes. I mean, changes our brain chemistry. It can be passed down
Mm.
genetically. It changes a lot, and like what's reversible, what's not, I have no idea. But unraveling, kind of going back to talking about connecting to our body, right? What makes us feel safe when we're traumatized relationally through a family system or through complex trauma that's
Mm.
consistent over and over again. That's just like chronically happening all the time. So there's really no space where we get to turn that off. Your whole self is wrapped around that, which is why we're like, oh my God, we have a therapy. And it takes how long? Like I had a client yesterday that was like from a very specific trauma that happened a couple of years ago. It took her 2 years, which is not very long at all when we're talking about rewiring things and reconnecting with ourselves in certain aspects of our life. It takes a lot of time to undo and then build up the other skills. And all of it's happening at the same time. Trauma affects everything about us. And then if you're neurodivergent on top of that, neurodivergent people, autistic people with ADHD or OCD or a learning disability or Tourette's, or there's a lot of things that fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. I don't know the exact percentage. I just don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's like something like 70% of people who have experienced trauma are also neurodivergent. It doesn't even have to be a person or a thing that happened to us, but just not being connected to ourselves because we experience the world differently. We're
More vividly, like very intense.
it's just not it's neurotypical, right? We're
But in
diverse.
a way, it works both ways too. We can experience the good stuff a lot better, just so like people don't feel like we're just shitting on neurodivergent people.
No, but well, I bring up the neurodivergent thing because I work a lot with that because of
Hmm.
my own self, but my interest based, that's what I care about a lot too. And there's trauma, you cannot talk about it without knowing a good bit about trauma as well. So that's really why
Yeah.
I brought that up. And yes, I don't like to go around saying that neurodivergent people have superpowers because that I don't think that's it either. It can be debilitating. Like just us being like, wait, what was I saying? That's not fun
No.
at all. We can be compassionate to ourselves. I'm not mad about
Yeah.
it. It's frustrating, but it just is. When we know those things about ourselves, like I grew up in a toxic family system. I grew up with an enmeshed relationship with my mom. I grew up this way, or I had this. When we can like know those things, we're not internalizing the behaviors that we thought were just us.
Correct.
I
You're defining where
don't.
they come from and what they are instead
Yeah.
of making it like you. Yeah, it's so true.
Mhm.
It's almost like when you go to the doctor and you've been feeling bad and you're like, what is wrong with me? And they finally tell you, oh, it's this. This
Mhm.
is the medicine for that. And then you're free from
Yeah.
it, even though your body's still working on it. Like, you're just like, oh, now I know what's wrong with me.
Trauma informs a a lot, a lot
Yeah.
about how we connect to ourselves, what we think about ourselves, how we treat ourselves. And I guess point to bringing up neurodivergence is you're more likely to be traumatized because of the sensitive nervous system, especially in our society today. I mean, none of
That, and like back in the day, the whole like we can beat it out of them, because it wasn't
Mhm.
it wasn't a thing. Like, hyperactive kids or anything wasn't like, oh, poor thing, we should probably find a way to teach them better or to like help them learn better. Or it was
Yeah,
like, just beat it out of them. They're just, or put them in sports, let them burn themselves out.
you know, corporal punishment. But time, what if that kid is an artist and it is totally against who they maybe don't even know they are to be sporty spice?
They
Sport.
made me do every sport at the school.
Yeah, me too. I was so burnt out with sports that when we switched schools my senior year, I wasn't eligible. And I was like, woohoo, good. Now I can
I
do a
didn't
little
want to
bit
do
more
this
myself.
anyways.
Yeah. I enjoyed volleyball, but
Yeah, that was me too,
we had a
volleyball. But
terrible.
like, they will, as a Hispanic, I was supposed to love soccer and I hated soccer.
Oh, I've never even thought about playing soccer because I don't want to run. All that is, it's just running, running, running.
Behind one ball.
Yeah. But trauma will, I mean, that's why you hear like if you had a really traumatic childhood and you're like just now figuring out who you are and you're having that quarter life crisis,
Well, that's
identity, that's because you're having an identity crisis. Who am I?
yeah. And that's actually something I've seen more often, even like just in my surroundings and my friend groups and everything. For
I think it's just because
that quarter life crisis.
we're talking more about these things.
So we're
Maybe,
hitting it before,
huh?
we're hitting it now.
Yeah, but I don't even know if this wasn't happening to your parents at this age when they were our age
Yeah.
now. What was
Yeah.
happening about mental health and the conversations
Mm.
about family systems and personality disorders and communication styles and the nervous system. No, ma'am, they had none of that.
Well, that's what I feel, because like my mom's finally going through her crisis now
Mhm.
that all her kids are gone and we're setting boundaries. And like, it's like getting like to be too much, right? But it's like, she's like, who am I without my kids? And like, she is having that crisis, and I'm like, wow, I'm so happy now looking back, because while I was in the and everything, you can't look at the silver lining. But like, now looking at it, I'm like, wow, I'm happy I'm getting to go through this phase now
Now,
than having to deal with like empty nest syndrome and trying to figure out who I am.
it affects everything.
So now I want to go into like living life in alignment with who you really are,
Mm-hmm.
to help. This is I'm asking for myself, because I'm still in like the finishing my morning, finishing figuring out who the hell I am and everything. How do I align myself with that?
Boundaries, which you are, sounds like you're pretty good at. And we don't always know what
Working on.
those things are, but I like I mentioned, mindful self-compassion. There is a professional counselor named Kristin Neff. She's been around for a long time. She's done a lot of research, and I utilize her self-compassion stuff a lot. She has a good website, but you type in building self-compassion and then clinical, the Center for Clinical Intervention. It's an Australian resource. There's an overview, and then there's seven modules about building self-compassion.
Okay.
We Our inner voice, right? You mentioned that a bit earlier when you were talking about like, well, then I just think I'm bad because that's what I get to hear all the time. Not 100%, but more often than the the pouring positive things and
Mm-hmm.
like uplifting and encouraging you, um, making you feel like I'm not a piece of shit. Really getting a hold. So we've set the boundaries. We've got all this psychoeducation. We've got a lot of language. We are more mindful and in tune with our body and our nervous system. And it's like, this is why I mentioned earlier that I feel like the word purpose and having purpose can be really toxic for people who are trauma survivors, because that's just more doing. That's just more writing. That's just more until I get here, then I can be okay with myself. Absolutely not. Throw it out the window. Literally, who gives a fuck? Every day I'll find some purpose, but compassion, self compassion. I'm mentioning the modules because they're really helpful with kind of checking off how you're talking to yourself, what you
Mm.
believe about that process with yourself. Am I using negative self talk or highly critical or judgmental talk to motivate myself in some way? Because sometimes that can be like, an example of that is when I'm like freaking out, but I know I need to get something done. And the second I get it done, I'm gonna be fine. I'm like, just get a grip, bitch. Just come on. Like, I'm not talking about those things that we kind of goof around with ourselves to kind of just get ourselves going, but the things that you can mentally say to yourself that you can just imagine yourself like shrinking under.
Mm. The
Get
guilt, the
well,
shame.
get a hold of how you're talking to yourself. Like, if you mess up, if you're disappointed, if you're angry, whatever the thing is with the relationship with yourself, start treating yourself like you treat your friends. Start imagining that self-talk like you're talking to your baby self or your actual baby. That's where we start to feel true safety within ourselves. That's when we allow ourselves to open up and experience things that maybe we wouldn't have allowed ourselves to experience before, whether it's just we don't deserve that, or I'm too overstimulated, or I just don't feel like I can be present because there's so much chatter in here. If you're looking to start over, look at the way you talk to yourself. Find ways to be kinder and have more compassion. Not all of our emotions are true or factual, but we often have these emotional things that go on and we don't necessarily need to do anything with, but then we're judging ourselves for thinking or feeling that way. It is
Mm.
that small. Forgive yourself every time if you're like, oh, that wasn't in line with my values or beliefs, but I thought it. Okay, move on.
Yeah, one of those things that I'm thinking about while you saying this is like emotional eating. I definitely emotionally eat, and
Mhm.
sometimes the guilt sets in
Yeah.
as soon as I finish eating. I'm just like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have ate that. I know better than that. Like blah blah blah, and like I'll get on myself, and it's like a lot, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's so true because
That's
it
a
goes
really
down
good
to the
example.
little things.
That is a very, very good example. So next time that happens, I want you, and that first pang of guilt kind of comes up, I want you to meet yourself thinking of like, okay, how would I meet a friend or that little person? I just
Mm.
want you to have compassion. Compassion makes us curious. So you might learn a bit more about that
About
relationship.
where it's coming from.
Yeah. And we don't, again, you don't have to. Sometimes, yeah, when we have severe things, or like he told me I was going to die because I had an eating disorder. Those are the most lethal mental health concern. They are. So that's why he said that. And self-compassion is a huge thing used in, the disordered eating community as well. Meeting yourself with curiosity. We hear that a lot in counseling too. Like, don't judge yourself. This is why I'm attaching for all your listeners and yourself this workbook that you can just look at, because it's not, okay, is this harmful or helpful? Okay, no, move on. It is the relationship that you have with you.
Mm.
And while like I said, we've stabilized ourselves, we've educated ourselves with what's going on. We've made big changes in our day-to-day life. We quit that. We stopped this, right? We boundaried that up. But then what's left is us, right?
Yes.
When we feel really restless and all of that.
It's
Start
like
with
raw
talk to
because you peeled so much stuff back. It's so raw. And it's like, how do you, yeah, like what you're saying, like it's so true. You need to start having compassion with yourself because you peeled all these things back. And sometimes I get that thought of like, why did I even do this in my life? I knew better. Or like, like things like that, where like you peeled all the things that was external,
Mm-hmm.
or at least for the most part. I feel like I peeled a lot of those, and I'm left with this raw version of myself that never found themselves because I never got a chance to.
But
And
don't
it's like I'm judging myself if it's like, because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
we missed the part where we got to normally develop into ourselves. That was supposed to happen in adolescence and young adulthood, and we didn't get that. So now we're doing it now. It's not overnight. Have to
I know that's a big thing too. Like it goes with the neurodivergency. I gotta get there now. Like, well, how
oh
do
for
I
sure,
find
for sure. I feel that too, but it's
cracking out on like this is I need to find my purpose?
doesn't
It
work
doesn't
that
work
way.
because I haven't
So
gotten anywhere. So it
So if
doesn't.
you're
I'm
like, okay,
proof of that.
now I can find myself, don't. It's not a to-do list. It's how do I meet myself? How do I talk to myself? How do I love myself?
That's really good advice.
The next, yeah, relook at the way because now you have the time, right? There's still pain, there's still grief that comes up. I'm sure still some ping pong. That's what I'd say for
Yes.
the dissonance is just the ping pong in our mind that can still come up, but you've had time and you got so many tools and it's locked in. So now you really do get to meet yourself. And that's so exciting too. So we want to hurry up and have like the perfect this. And I know you're not talking about like the perfect life, but purpose,
Yes.
right, can
Yeah.
quickly, in my opinion, turn into perfectionism, searching for
Yes.
purpose. So you'll find that the closer and kinder you get to yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like your true self or your child parts and anything else that is part of your true self. You kind of intimidate those parts to not speaking out of what they really want to say because you're so obsessed with finding that purpose. Because that's what I felt recently. I've slowed down, but I went into this whole like, I need to find my purpose. Like, I dig into this and how do I do this and how do I do that? Or maybe I should try everything and see which one sticks. And it just became an obsession. And I almost felt like that thing that we talked about, how taking care of your physical body makes those voices louder. It made them dim down again because it was like, this girl is obsessing about something else. I'm almost going into a survival mode again, like miniature version of what it was, because
with the
I'm
next phase. Like, listen,
with the next
is
phase
all of this was messed up.
to live my life
Right.
at its fullest.
It's right now,
Yes.
and it will all the stuff will come. But being more compassionate, slowing things down, being connected to yourself is the purpose, right? That is the purpose. Just living.
Wow. That's a good way to see
Is
it.
life.
Is
Stuff will
being
come.
connected to yourself.
Mhm.
What if that's it and we're just all looking for the thing?
I think it was it for a long time. We don't
That's making me
history.
so sad.
I'm very interested in history and I love sociology and social sciences now because when you're raised in the world was created in 7 days and the Big Bang is not a thing and Darwinism was Satan. It closes you off from who we were, humans.
Well,
What
it's crazy because, like, I always feel like when science and religion were like together, it was like the biggest explosion, right? Because at the time, they weren't seeing each other as the enemy, and it worked out. And some of like the basic, like, rules of gravity and all that came during that time, things that we still apply. And then we went into this like separation thing, and now everything's like, this says that's the devil and this says they're dumb.
and everything
So
is so polarized now too. Spirituality is very important.
yeah, I mean, I meant more in like the sense of like sometimes it feels like you said it's polarized and stuff, and like just getting to know the root of one doesn't make you evil, because you'll probably learn something about yourself. And if spirituality is part of your life, then it's probably gonna like back up something in your spiritual life too.
And it influences, right? We're talking about what
Yeah.
influences our self-concept. And we're here, we're now, we can speculate about all of that. And it is so interesting. We can always like look back and go, maybe that was a little bit easier, but I think it really was to certain degrees, right? I'm grateful for modern medicine and all these technologies and things like that. But the immense amount of pressure and go, 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 and dread that we feel. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough resources. Like we all collectively feel that. And to then add on top of it after you've healed so much and just need to, for a while, it sounds like, honestly,
Mm.
to add on the extra layer of what else we have achieved so much. Or not to,
And you
like,
haven't even celebrated it
our
because you're so
species,
focused on the
yeah,
next
like, we've
thing.
achieved so much, and we kind of need to reevaluate some things. So let's just go back to some basics, like what's going on for just me right now that I don't have all of the cognitive dissonance or the deep grief or the confusion about what my life was. Now that I've worked through so much of that, do not put yourself in the position to have a next best thing or the next thing.
Mm.
Oh, now I'm homeostasis, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the time, not perfectly. That's normal. You're going to fluctuate. But now I'm here. So things just living, just loving myself and others can be so gratifying.
Wow. Yeah.
It doesn't need,
What if, like you said, like, what if the purpose is just living?
it's just living. If I didn't have to work, I needed this education and I will continue to do this, but I probably wouldn't because why? Why would I need to do that? I don't know.
That's awesome though, because you're right. Like, being kind and being kind to yourself and others and everything is so gratifying. What if that's just the purpose right there?
Making a
Just
meal,
being
cleaning up your space, going on a walk,
little purposes every day.
creating something. Yeah. I think, okay, so now I got the degree and I'm almost fully licensed. So, what trauma modality am I going to get trained in? And what $3,000 certification do I want to need? Oh, and I want to, advertise myself as this type of counselor. I probably should get like, it can go on and on and on. And it's okay. Like one step at a time. I have enough tools to do my job well right now if I'm present and have the basic skills down. So why would that be different for myself if I'm taking care of my basic needs and I've worked through and have education on the things that intellectually confused or stifled me, then the work now is just to live.
I think that one of those thoughts that always spirals me into that is like our mortality. I'm not afraid of death, right? It's not like, oh, I'm about to die. It's not that. It's just like, I know that it comes for everyone. And it's like, I don't want to leave this earth without finding what I was supposed to be doing while I
Mm-hmm.
was here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of my reoccurring thoughts that like brings me into that low spiral a lot.
Yeah. Well, what if what you did here isn't recognized until after you're gone?
That'd be fine. I just want to know that I did what I was
That you did it.
supposed to do here.
Yeah.
But then again, I would be dead. So how would I know?
But yeah, but we don't know what happens after that. So maybe you can hover down and check it out. I don't know. We don't know. That is a really hard one.
What if it's reincarnation and I come
think-
back over and over and over again until I find it?
I think I have just separated myself, my identity. I've separated it so far away from achievement that I just don't care. And I know
I'm still healing that part with.
I know that could come off as like, I don't know the right word, but maybe a little condescending or like dismissive. But now I'm just kind of realizing that's really why I don't attribute achievement with my self-worth anymore.
Yeah, that one's been really hard to rewire.
It doesn't mean I have apathy. It doesn't mean I don't like take care of things. It's just like I don't view accomplishment as something, and it doesn't mean that when I do accomplish something that I don't like, feel
celebrate it. Yeah,
yeah. But I'm trying to think about why I'm like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's because I've separated that accomplishment means you're worthy.
Yeah, I think I'm still working. That's one of the hardest parts for me is like, I've separated it a little bit, but it's just like, I always go back to like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I don't have that a lot, then I feel like I have lost my purpose or my worth, or like, where's the value in that?
It may be a cool thing for you to kind of challenge yourself not all the time. Don't overdo it because then, I don't want the
Yeah, I can
tendency to
obsess
try,
both ways.
right? But like when you're feeling like, okay, I've got a moment and I can just rest or do something or do nothing, but you kind of feel stuck. And what's the best thing to do? Challenge yourself every now and then by doing the opposite thing. Like if I'm saying that I need to do XYZ, but I'm kind of feeling like, what does that matter? It just checks off the box for my old self that's telling me you have to do these things. Challenge yourself
Mhm.
by just not doing anything. Not all the time, because it freaks people out. I'm just saying that. Like I'm not gonna we don't
Yeah,
have to
I
think
love that.
stop, we're just gonna completely stop. Or same thing when we have a dam in our emotional processing that we think that once we open that up, it's never gonna stop. But it does. You'll get back up if you rest. But a few times throughout your week or maybe once a day or something, when you really do have that moment of silence or chill or nothingness going on, that's a really good way to over time retrain yourself to feel comfortable with calmness because it makes sense for all of us who had some level of trauma in our childhood that things being okay doesn't feel familiar. And even if it's
Mhm.
chaos, we know what that is.
Mhm.
Peace and calm is so counter to what our nervous system is used to working with that it's just different and therefore we kind of fear it or don't really recognize that. But give yourself, I mean, I'm talking like 5-10 minutes of like
Yeah.
a challenge of just like I'm feeling pulled, but I really kind of do want to sit or rest or just scroll or I want to go get myself a coffee or just something that you want to do that you're telling yourself that you shouldn't or you
Yeah.
can't and do it. Even if it's very, very, very small, because that too will teach. I mean, what fires together wires together. Like in
Yeah.
neuroscience, I don't know a lot about it, but we do have to have some understanding. What fires together wires together. And so when we
Mm.
can do something just slightly different, some of the time it interrupts
It's
that pattern.
that pattern.
It interrupts
Yeah.
the pattern. And then over time, maybe downtime or silence or actual peace and calm doesn't feel so violent to your system because your neural pathways are starting to understand that actually this doesn't mean threat, it means rest.
Yeah. I love that. And that's going to bring me to, we usually leave everyone with a challenge for the week. What would you recommend for someone that is either about to start a pivot or is in the middle of it?
Well, I would always recommend if you feel like you don't have a lot of actually helpful social support because yeah, not everybody does all of this work through therapy, but if you really don't have anyone in your life or um, some kind of mentor outside of a counselor to help you get grounded with this next path or where you're pivoting from towards counseling, absolutely try and find a counselor um, to work through these
And
things.
what would you challenge those, like, the people listening for? Like, what would be their challenge on that besides finding something that they can practically do themselves?
Yeah, I'm always gonna go back to self-compassion. I
Mm.
encourage your listeners, maybe I'll provide the link and you can do it to look through. She has a book as well. This is free and it has the
Mm-hmm.
extended version or just the brief thing. Start learning about self-compassion and what we mean by that in a therapeutic way. Kristin Neff, Center for Clinical Interventions, the Building
I'll
Self-Compassion.
link it both on the video and on the show notes so that people can just find it easier.
Yeah, and sometimes those things like work at like a book club. So if things are
Mm.
really expensive, I totally understand all of that access and all of that. We're busy. And if we don't have moderate or to severe concerns that we're working through, I get that's not the first step everybody wants to take. Download those worksheets and maybe start
Mental health
group,
club.
a little self-compassion group where we worked through module 1 and now we're gonna
Oh,
meet
that's
and,
nice.
and talk about what we scored on our self-compassion. Do we have a lot of it? Do we have a little bit of it? I'll send you to Kristin Neff, the counselor who developed all this, does also have a self-compassion scale. So it's like the roadblock to a lot of getting to know ourselves and allowing ourselves, right, to do other things. So challenge is learn about self-compassion, start thinking about how you talk to yourself, you know, in all the different types of moods that you could be in or situations. And I think it will help you build confidence. And we need confidence when we're in a shifting phase of our life. So self-compassion.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for your time and just sharing your story. This is so good for myself. I was asking for myself.
Yeah,
because it helps a lot. Just like sometimes you feel like you're looking at everyone on the other side of it, and just seeing people like steps ahead of you, it makes it easier to be like, okay, this is more digestible than finding you like 10 years from now and being like, oh yeah, I did that in my, like 30s, and yeah, it was great.
We do, and that's another cool thing that our brain a lot does. Right, we've been through that. I still deal with a lot of that too, and this was good for me as well. I need to talk about my story with other people as well, not just counsel all the time.
Yeah, I think it's very much relatable because it's true. I think a lot of us are getting to that quarter life crisis.
I definitely I feel like I've already done it. If I have another one, okay, cool. I'll have some tips and tricks for myself more so than I did at that point. But I do feel like now it begins.
Okay, Mary, I'm going to let you go, and we did it.
We did it.
It's recorded. Oh my gosh.
You're okay. I remember my life. I can start over.
This was so good. Why? I pressed the button. I was like, where's the timer? Where's the timer? Where's the timer? Where's the timer?
We can start over. You're good.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mary.
It's okay. It's okay.
Here you were nervous, and I'm the one fucking up.
Well, maybe you picked up on some of my nerves.
Oh, man.
Guys, we had a really great conversation for about 30 minutes, and we're going to rehash it.
Yeah. I forgot to record. That sucks because it's been 40
It may work out because I can get through those a little quicker now that I've touched on them, and then we can dig deeper into your other ones. It's okay. And I don't have any strict plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Sorry about
one.
Okay. We could do that.
We could go a little bit further past one. That's just my tentative because it gives me time to run my errands before she gets off the bus.
Sorry. Okay.
I'm glad you realized it now and not when we were done.
Hey there, thank you so much for watching. If this episode spoke to you, or maybe you know someone that might benefit from watching this, share it or like and subscribe. If not, we also popped in some other episodes we thought you might like. Thanks for tuning in.